Welcome to Product Camp. I'm excited to do a talk with you today about the PM you want to be. And so I'll talk about what that is, what that means to me, what I hope it means to you by the end of the talk. And what I want to do is today define what goes into our jobs. Like, we all have product management jobs and they all look different. If you talk to people, it's like, oh yeah, we don't do it like that there. So why is that the case? There are a lot of factors that are inside the company and outside of the company that influence it and shape it. And we want to talk about what those are so you can find the job that's the best fit for you. So what we'll cover today, I want to talk a little bit about the PM path. It's different for everybody. I want to talk about, PMing your job, and I'll talk a little bit about what that means as well. I'll talk about 5 dimensions you can use to evaluate jobs or understand them better. And then lastly, I'll talk about how you can apply it to yourself to become the PM you want to be. First, before I introduce myself even, I'd like to reminisce. So this was me 4 years ago. I did the intro comments and, it was kind of fun because when I got asked to do this, the first thing I thought about was, oh yeah, I went to Product Camp 4 years ago and I talked about PMing your PM job. That was like the thing I talked about in the intro. And so I thought it was only fair if I came back and explained what that meant. It took 4 years and I'm going to finally do it. So thanks for being patient. At the time, my wife and I had just had our first son. He was 2 months old. I was like super tired. I still am. Because you can see we're growing. So, like we're hiring, we're growing, whatever. But I'm Jeff Rambharack. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm the VP of product at PixieSet. And this is my family. I don't do that well at like the professional headshot or wearing a blazer or anything like that, because this is who I am. This is what's important to me. And so you can see the guy that was just born when I was here 4 years ago is now climbing on top of me in the back there. He gave me some great presentation tips this morning. He said, okay, Dad, you listen well, tell them lots of things, and show them stuff. So that's what I'm going to do today. And the other one, the little guy there, Felix, he's about 6 months old now. Like that was a few months ago, and he's already grown quite a bit already. So let's talk about the PM path and what that is and what it means to all of us. Oops. These are some of the stops that have been along my path. So I started out of university at Microsoft. I was a product manager on PowerPoint and the shared graphics platform for Microsoft Office. I did a lot of stuff in between. I've also worked at Amazon as a senior PM. I was a director of product management at Clio for about 3.5 years. And then right now I'm the VP of products, where I lead the products management and design disciplines at PixieSet. And so the path, one thing I want to stress as we go into this journey is to note that the path looks different for everybody. And you also can't see what it looks like on LinkedIn. So what you don't see here is a couple of small companies that I tried, didn't really work out. They weren't a great fit for me, weren't that exciting, left after a short time. You also don't see that I took about 5 years to go back to university. I got a master's degree in sustainable energy. I was working on a PhD, decided I didn't want to go into academia. I dropped out of that. And so that's important. I think when we talk about this, the PM path, your career, your jobs, I want to stress the importance of being patient and being calm, because it's easy to want everything right now, right? Like you look at LinkedIn, you see what people are doing. It's like, I want that right now. And that's called entitlement. So we don't want to do that. What we want to do is be patient and play the long game. Because look around, a lot of you have like 10, 20, 30 years left in your career to work this stuff out. You have a lot of opportunities. Oh, so I want to talk about some things that I often hear when I talk to PMs about their career. I think these are very common. They shouldn't be a surprise or new to any of you. One of the main things I hear all the time, I'm just looking for a role at the next level. So who's heard that before? Hands up. Yeah, you probably said it too, right? We've all been down that road. Another thing I always hear is, I'd like to work at a company with a great culture. Who doesn't want that? Does anybody not want to work at a company with a great culture? But culture is very specific and personal. So we'll talk about some of the important things there. And then another huge one is, I just want to get into one of the big tech companies. That'll solve all my problems, sort of. That's like a comment that a lot of people will make. But things I also hear on the flip side of this are, not much has changed at this new level that I'm at. There's more I'd like to do. And, there's like this invisible thing, you go from like intermediate to senior PM. Is your life better now? Are you doing a better job? Usually you're doing the same job and they just changed the title. And then on the culture front, like a lot of the time, you do the interviewing, it's like, how's the culture? Oh, it's the best culture. Like we have the best culture here. You go in and join the company, you get super frustrated. Like it's not everything that people said it was, or it's not a good fit for you. And then a lot of the time you join the big tech company and then it can be a huge mess, right? It's like no proof that it's good because it's big. So, no offense to the big tech companies, I've worked at a few, but sometimes it is chaos there too. So what are you actually going to do? How are you going to actually find the job that's a good fit for you if these things that everybody is saying when they're looking for jobs don't help you get there? I'm going to talk to you about how to PM your job. Okay, so first, before we talk about how to PM your job, I want to talk about how we do our work. So how do we PM stuff? How do we manage products? We PM the shit out of them, right? We go into the frameworks and we read the blogs and we get the textbook and we talk to our peers and you get a mentor. We do a great job of that. Everybody here, we all put the work in. Maybe we go and like get a canvas, it's like a minor feature request or like a translation or a typo error or something like that. Don't worry, I got a canvas for that. So we go dig out a framework. Maybe we do like 2 or 3 canvases before we get it right. And then we're gonna like do some rice on it. It's like, oh, don't worry, I gotta evaluate this. I'm gonna give it a score before I, like prioritize it. And then, of course, there's a backlog. Like, so there's a backlog for everything. It's got to be beautiful. It's got to be tidy. It's got to be organized. But the question is, how do you manage your career? Do you do any of this stuff for your job? And the answer is, for a lot of people, probably not. And there are a lot of jobs. So this was a search. I know the first comment you're going to make, you can't trust the LinkedIn search. There's project manager jobs in there. It's okay. Don't worry. You can filter them out. Say if half of them are product manager jobs, different levels, different eligibility, maybe 10 or 20 might be a fit for you to apply to. That's still a lot. How are you going to choose the ones you put your energy into, right? Say if it was 10. Are you going to submit 10 applications and give 100% of your effort to 10 of them? And then say if you got 10 offers, which one are you going to choose? So I want to talk about some things that'll help you do that. So I have been thinking about this over time, and I've thought about 5 dimensions that define our jobs. There are other ones as well. Of course, this is not comprehensive. Jobs are very complex, but hopefully this gives you some new perspective on how to think about PM jobs so that you can understand what they will be like when you do them. The first one is the role of the product. I think this has a huge influence on what your job will be like as a product manager. And for the sake of a thought exercise, we'll look at some of the biggest tech companies. So Google, Amazon, Apple, Meta, and Microsoft. And I've worked at 2 of these companies, and the way that product management is done at them and what went into the job was entirely different. Amazon, you write the press release and the FAQ, very focused on the business case and getting buy-in and investment, stuff like that. At Microsoft, it was like 1,000 years ago, but at the time, it was like very UX heavy. It did a lot of wireframing and storyboards and what would, the equivalent of what user stories were at the time, but like scenarios and use cases for the product. And at the other companies, I have like a glimpse into what those look like as well. So they're super different as well. So how could that be the case? Like if people say like, yeah, I just want to go work for a big tech company, and you've got 5 really, really big tech companies, and the job is going to be totally different at each company. That's not the answer, right? That can't be the answer. So I think what we can look at then is, what does the product do? And then what do you have to do? If your job is to manage the product, you got to look at what the product does so you can figure out what you need to do and some of the traits that go along with the job for that. So first, let's take Google. And these are all simplifications. Obviously, Google does a lot of stuff, right? But the products role, find anything, right? You go to google.com, little box, finds anything, right? Images, sounds, words, information. They've expanded it a ton, and it's a huge platform now, obviously. So your role, like if you're a product manager at Google and you're working on that, your job is to help it find more things. And to do that, it's very algorithmic. There's a ton of data that goes into that. It's now tightly integrated. So going from the little search box, now it's like voice-based search, maps, like there's millions of kinds of information that you can search through Google now. But ultimately, at the end of the day, your job as the PM is to help it find more things. For Amazon, they want to sell everything, right? If you're on the Amazon.com side, and so your job as the PM is to sell more things. Again, this is a funnel exercise now. It's a different job already, right? So what you're trying to do is get from browsing to checkout and conversion, right? To get people to complete the purchase. So you're going to work on the conversion flow. You're going to deal with tight margins. It's retail, right? So if you're selling like a 20-cent pencil or something like that, then margins are an important part of the business, and that's going to really shape your job as well. And if you worked at Apple, then you want to sell the best phones, and your job is totally different again, right? You're not trying to deal with tight margins or anything. The margins on an iPhone are gigantic. It's like 100% margin, or 50% of the price is margin, right? So your job is to sell the best phones, and now you're in fancy land, right? Your job is to make the phone fancier. It's got to be shiny. It's got to be new. It's got to be cool. People have to love it. So you're in the world now of UX, of beauty, of fun, and you're dealing with very large margins in the business. And if you worked at Meta, then the product's role is to connect people. And your job as the PM is to create more connections. You want to get more likes. You want to have like bigger networks. You want to have people adding friends, all of that kind of stuff. This is very algorithmic as well. There's tons written about it. Everybody kind of knows that like the social graph and all that kind of stuff works. It deals very heavily with data, obviously, so you can make good recommendations and all of that sort of stuff. And then engagement and the content that goes into that is a huge part of this as well. And then lastly, at Microsoft, I mean, they do also a ton of things, but if you just looked at like their core business of productivity stuff, usually they're trying to make work easier for people. And when you're doing that, you're trying to increase their productivity. So you're dealing a lot of the time with breaking down workflows, understanding pain points, and tons of integration work as well. So these are just 5 companies and 5 totally different ways to look at the PM job, because that's what you need to do to manage those products, since that's what those products do. So I did some categorization. I mean, like that's a lot, and there's even more, tons of different roles that products will play. Obviously, they don't all do these 5 things, but there's categories of stuff that products do, and then categories of PM work that you're going to do. So the first category is conversion. So anytime you're doing a conversion type of exercise or a conversion type of product, your job is to optimize that funnel, right? So if you're doing the Google searches, if you're selling stuff on Amazon, at the end of the day, as a PM, you're probably looking at a funnel somewhere and saying, cool, we've got like this conversion rate through every step, and we're trying to do more of that. The second one is the engagement type of work. And so this is where you just want to grow the engagement. Like say if you're on Netflix or Google or Facebook, the metrics are known. If you like search for the North Star metrics for these type of companies. For YouTube, they just want you to stream more hours. For Netflix, they want you to stream more hours. So that's more engagement in the product. For Facebook, they want you to like scroll, more doom scrolling. That's what they're looking for. And then there's a productivity category. So this is where you're solving pain points for people. Companies like Microsoft and Salesforce obviously do this a lot. And the last category, I just kind of bucketed this as joy, right? So these are like the Apples and the Disneys where you're just trying to make people happy or sell them something that they really desire at the end of the day. So your role there as a PM is to make it exceptional. It's a really different job as well. So for each of these dimensions, what I want to do is give you some questions, because when you're in the interview process, you should always be interviewing the company as well. And these are some of the things you can ask during that process to help you understand the role of the product. You can ask, why do customers choose the product? So if the answer is because they love it, like we have the best one, you know that you're in somewhere in like joy territory or something like that, right? If it's because it's like ROI or because they're stuck and life is hard without it, then you know you're in pain point land. So this question could be very revealing. There's a lot you'll learn from the answer to this a lot of the time. You can ask about the company's main objectives. This is where the metrics come into play. So if the metric is, hey, we want to increase the conversion rate from 93% to 94%, then you're probably in some sort of funnel game, right? That's what you're going to be doing as a PM. You can ask about the product metrics. And so some companies don't even have them, right? Like some keep, and that's okay, by the way. But some companies are super metric driven, and it might be to grow a specific kind of volume, grow a specific kind of engagement. And that will tell you a lot, again, about what you're trying to drive, what you're trying to achieve as a PM there. And then lastly, you can talk about what the most successful PMs at this company do differently. And I think that's where you're really going to get to the essence of what that job is about, compared to the other PM jobs, because they're going to talk specifically about what's working for the product managers that are the best at that company. The second dimension I want to talk about is market fragmentation. So you can think of this as a spectrum from fragmented to consolidated. So there are markets where there are tons of people that own tiny bits of the market share. And then there are segments where it's super consolidated. You think about like utilities with BC Hydro, they are the market, right? It's like they're the only player, and everybody in between. So everybody else is on the spectrum. So in the fragmented markets, there are a lot of small players and nobody dominates the market. And in a consolidated market, there are a few really big players and they do dominate the market. They own most of the market share. And this graph, there's a resource that I'll talk about in a second, or like where you can find this if you want to learn more about this. But this is a great way to just understand the dynamics in the market, because the market is going to hugely shape your job as a PM as well. And so you can look here at the axis is the market share of everyone except the top 50 customers. And so what you're looking at there, like if you're in the bottom left quadrant there, those are the ones where there's a few companies that have all the market share effectively. Those are your enterprise market segments. At the far other end of the graph, the ones where there are tons of companies and most of the market share is not in the top 50 companies. These are the highly fragmented ones. In the business world, this was a B2B article. So companies like segments like restaurants are good examples of this. Even farther on the spectrum would be consumers, right? So you just picture like for Facebook or for Apple, the fragmentation, like every person can have an iPhone or a Facebook account. So that's extremely fragmented up to the scale of billions. So some examples of highly fragmented markets would be restaurants, creatives, or consumers. And companies that serve them then, and this is where you can look at what the job might be like in those markets, would be companies like DoorDash, that work with restaurants and consumers. Toast works with restaurants. Airbnb deals with hosts, right? Like people that are renting a house or part of a house, and Canva for the millions and millions of creatives out there. And let's talk about the dynamics then. So what is required of the job as a result of this? First of all, you need a lot of customers to win. So this is not an industry where you're going to go out and say, yeah, we're going to like land a contract or close a deal and we win this year. Because if you do that with very small businesses, then you won't get enough revenue. You won't grow as a business. So you need tons and tons of customers to win in these segments. You can't possibly talk to all of them. So again, like if you look at like Facebook or something, and you've got 2 billion users, how are you going to talk to all of them? It's impossible. And as a result of that, that means you're probably going to be working with data or using mass market approaches to engage with your users and your customers. A lot of the time, these people are underserved, especially in the B2B world. For the last 30, 40 years, a lot of people made software for enterprises, and now there's a huge movement of doing stuff for smaller businesses. And you can shape the industry. This is kind of a neat one with the smaller or more fragmented industries. So you look at Airbnb or Uber or DoorDash, and they said, all right, well, we're just going to change the way that those types of companies do business. In consolidated industries, examples would be banks, utilities, airlines. They're gigantic, obviously. These are like the super large companies, often old, very well established. And some of the companies that serve them would be like your Oracle, SAP, Sabre types of companies. And the dynamics are totally different. So you need the whales to win. Everybody's chasing the whale. So there's going to be some deal in Salesforce that everybody looks at and says, yep, that's the one we want to close this year. Your biggest customers hold sway. And what I mean by that is, you've got some account somewhere that if they say like, we're going to churn unless you do this, you're probably going to do it. What's your choice? There are usually established competitors to what you do, because like I said, people have made enterprise software for a really long time. So what you're trying to do there is displace, compete, or disrupt that industry. And then you can expect resistance to change. I mean, like if you're an airline or a bank or whatever, there's often reasons why they're very large and enterprisey types of companies. Sometimes there's like regulatory or safety concerns. And so they're not just going to be like, cool, yeah, we'll transform the way that we work. Thanks for your software. That's really nice. So, okay. Some questions you can ask then to understand this dynamic better. I love asking this first one. How big is your biggest customer as a percentage of your total revenue? And if it's 20%, that tells you a lot. You're going to do a lot for that one customer. If it's a fraction of a percent, like 0.001%, then you're probably not going to listen to anybody more than anybody else. You get to choose and kind of do like a mass market approach as a PM. Second question you can ask is, how much of your roadmap is dedicated to what that one customer wants. A lot of the time, if you have these gigantic accounts and it's 20% of your revenue, your roadmap for a whole year might just be doing the stuff that they asked you for. And that's okay. I mean, some people love to work like that, but it's really different than a highly fragmented one, because then if you have no gigantic accounts, your roadmap won't be driven by or shaped by any one company. And then I always like to ask this one as well: what would it mean to the business if that account turned? Because you need the whales to win. So even just in terms of the success and potential of the company that you go work at, this is an important one to understand the dynamics. So the first great read that I'll share with you, this is from Tidemark, which is like a venture capital sort of group. Picking your market, vertical TAM, and concentration. It's mostly about the B2B space, but I think it's kind of applicable to consumers as well. And the link is there. We'll figure out how to get the slides to you. But if you Google those words, you'll find the article for sure. The third dimension I want to talk about is the acquisition model. And I think this one has a lot written about it, so I won't spend quite as much time on it. So acquisition models, ways that your users or your customers get your product. There's a product-led model, obviously, and I know Partho is going to do a big talk on that later and go deeper on that topic. This is the lowest touch model, right? If you build it, they will come. This is the field of dreams model for product. There's a marketing-driven model where there's medium touch, and your job there is to lead the customers to the product, and then if you do a great job of that, they'll consume it. And then there's a sales-driven model where it's very, very high touch, and it's not even about leading the customers to your product. You got to bring the product to them ultimately for them to find it and acquire it. So of course, this shapes the job that you have as PM as well. If you're in a product-led company, your job is to convince them with the product. You're not relying on a salesperson or marketing materials or anything. The story needs to be clear. The value needs to be clear. They need to be able to understand it and get started and be successful with it, all within the product. And in this model, self-service is better than service. So, everything from like your onboarding flow to the purchasing flow, everything is going to be built into the product so that your users, your customers can do it for themselves, which is a contrast. We'll talk about, like in the sales model, that's not necessarily the case. And usually in this model, the company's goals are the product goals. You look at like your OKRs, so, like your YouTube sort of thing. There's no people out there selling YouTube, but the company's goals then would be the product goals. In the marketing-driven model, then generating leads is a huge part of the business. So, are you producing the content or doing the ads or whatever it is that generates the leads? Telling a great story is important. So this is where you're not just building the value into the product and demonstrating the value in the product, but often you're working on the positioning with your marketing team a lot. That's a big part of the job as a PM then, if you're in this kind of world. And then usually you spend to grow. So this is where stuff like the customer acquisition cost ratio compared to the lifetime value of the customer comes into play. And then lastly, in the sales-driven model, you're ultimately helping sales to close deals, right? Like if that's how the business grows as a PM, it's really important to do that. In this model, self-service is often more important than self-service, or just as important. And often the goals for the company look different here. This is where your OKRs or your company goals might really look like sales quotas that everybody's supposed to hit, and volumes of deals and that sort of stuff that the company wants to hit for the year. So of course, all of these things totally change the job that you would be doing, and it's important to understand them. When you're doing the interview, you can ask questions like, how do you sell or grow your product? And just get into the weeds on it, grill them on it, walk through the flow and how they get their customers to use the product. I love to understand how customers onboard. So there's handheld onboarding where it's like, okay, we made a good product, there's some good features. All we need to do is spend 20 hours with them explaining how to use it, compared to a product where somebody just like activates it and it's obvious and they start going with it right away. And then you can ask about the company goals. That'll tell you a lot about where the focus is. If the company goals sound like product goals, that'll tell you something about your job as a PM. There's going to be a lot of focus on you, for better or for worse. Some people love that, and you want to be the center of attention. If the goals are sales goals, then that's different and something that some people prefer. You can say, cool, my job is to support them and create great products that they can sell. And then this will show in how the product roadmap is prioritized. So if you ask somebody to walk you through that in detail, you will hear, it's like, we looked at all the opportunities and the value of the pipeline and what we're trying to close. Sounds like a sales-driven roadmap. versus a world where you say, cool, we're just trying to drive more engagement, or there's this vision that we're trying to achieve, which would sound a lot more like a product-driven model. So a great read here would be Leslie's Compass. I always like this article. They talk about sort of like the complexity of the product and why you would have a sales-driven versus a marketing-driven and even a product-led model. And it's not because of like any sort of skill or competency or anything like that. It's just, say if you're selling a nuclear reactor console, an extremely complex product, it's not going to be a self-serve product-led growth model, okay? Like you've got to spend the time, you got to work the deal, you got to train the customer, which is 100% different than going to google.com and doing a search. The fourth dimension I want to talk about is scale. And I think this one, again, is like one that's talked about a little bit more, but I want to do a quick refresher on it. So, this is the life of a company from inception to large scale. When you start a company, there are no PMs, unless you were a PM that started a company. That happens increasingly these days. But usually, one of the founders is a PM. Say if there's two founders, one of them wears the PM hat. So there are no jobs for us. That's what the job looks like there. And then there's the first PM job. So usually the founder gets busy. There's other stuff that they've got to do. Now there's business stuff and business development and funding to secure. And so they hire the first PM. The job of the first PM is to introduce product management into the company. They also have to live in the founder's brain. Like there's that whole synergy thing where the founder's just like, are you thinking the way I'm thinking, which is proof that you're thinking correctly. But that's where, as the first PM, you're going to start to say, hey, what would be cool if we prioritized stuff? Let's try that, see how it works. And like convincing people about the discipline. There's like 3 developers that've been building stuff forever. It's like, hey, we should probably like do some requirements or like make a backlog or something. So you're really introducing the concept at that stage. When you get into the later growth stage, then you might hire your first PM leader. And so that's where you might bring in a director, head of product, VP, any of those types of roles. And their job is to figure out how to do it better. Somebody's been doing it, the company's kind of been fumbling through it. And there's room for every company to grow, but this person's focus then is make it better. And then when you're scaling, if you're a very large company, one of those big tech companies, you're going to do it their way. You're not going to walk in and be like, hey, I know we should do product management. So, it's a great place to learn, though. It doesn't mean you're just like obedient. It's a really good place to learn an established way of doing product management. So questions you can ask here, and I mean, you can always look at the number of employees on LinkedIn. That tells you a ton as well. But ask, how big is the PM team? And ask who leads it. Like, what's their background and who's the PM team? For example, could report to the head of engineering. That'll tell you something about the job compared to if they report to a product leader. Ask what the team is doing poorly. These are some of the challenges. If you're looking for an opportunity to help a company do product management better, understand what they're doing badly. And then understand why they're hiring this role right now. So there's kind of like the chaos or panic-based hiring where it's like, I don't know, people are doing too much stuff. I've got too much on my plate. I need somebody else to just come in and help with things. Or sometimes there's a more structured or insightful view on why this role, because it might be part of the scaling plan. It might be a specific product, process, or people problem that they're trying to solve at that time. And then the last dimension 5, is who you get to be. And, initially I wrote at work and then I crossed it out. And there's a good reason for that. I mean, times have changed since 2020. There used to be a world where you went to work and your family at home wouldn't see what that looked like. And then you got to come home and be the person you were at home. That's not true anymore. Now, like, your kids are part of the Zoom meetings, your family members are hearing you on the Zoom calls. And sometimes, you can see their face where they're just like, wow, I can't believe they said that. So there is no line anymore. There's no who you get to be at work and who you get to be at home. It's just who you get to be. And a couple of great reads. I'm going to start with great reads this time. So I always like this article. Clayton Christensen is known for books like The Innovator's Dilemma and a whole bunch of cool principles in the business world, like the disruptive innovation principle. He's kind of the guy that coined that and developed those theories. And this article, even though he's like a really well-respected person that's influenced the tech industry, this is a deeply personal article. He talked about what was important to him. And it's not the things you might expect. Like, he talks about the importance of family and how people often underinvest in family over the course of their career. So I like to go back and read this like once a year. I think it's a great read and tells me a lot about who I want to be. Another great read is The $1 Trillion Coach. I think a lot of people have probably read this one. And it's about a guy that coached the people at Google and Apple and all these other companies. But what I love about this, so this is this guy that's had huge impact throughout the tech industry. So many people, like if you look at the list of names, you'd be like, yeah, those are the people leading the tech industry. He doesn't have a MBA from Stanford or a PhD in computer science or anything like that. And look at the things that they say about him. Like this is the person that helped tech companies become better. All the tech companies that you know and love. He left behind a legacy of growing companies and successful people, an abundance of respect, friendship, and love. So you think about that. You think about what you're trying to be in your job, and you look at what Bill Campbell was trying to do in his job and what he was trying to leave behind. And I think it's important to think about this. So questions you can ask about this are, what's the average tenure of the employees? I've been asking this one a lot more. So you ask a company, what's the culture like? They're going to tell you it's the best culture. Does that actually tell you anything about what the culture's like? No. I think one of the most important things is asking how long people stick around. If people on average stick around for like 5 years, they've got to love it there. You just don't do that in this industry unless you love your work. If the average tenure is super short, like when I was in the AWS org that I was in, that was years ago, but the average tenure was 168 days. So that told me a lot about the culture and like what people thought of it when they were doing their work. Second question you can ask, what frustrates you the most about your job? This is a sneaky question because if the person fires up and they start to look frustrated, then they're probably frustrated in their job. You could ask people this, and if it's not a frustrating company, they're probably like, what? I don't understand. What are you talking about? I love my job. Ask who they admire the most and why. That'll tell you a ton about the culture. And so, if they talk about it and they say, oh, I really admire this one leader, so hard on everyone, demolishes people in meetings. That's a really different story and a really different culture than if you ask them to say, oh, I really admire this one person. He takes care of everybody when they're having a hard time. And I've seen him help people grow more than anybody else I have in my career. That would tell me a ton about what the culture is like at that company. And then lastly, ask them why they stay. That'll tell you what the highlights are really and what defines the culture of the company. So those are my 5 dimensions. And now I want to talk about how you can define the PM you want to be. I'll talk a little bit from my personal experience first. So these were my criteria actually before I took my last job. I've been more thoughtful about this at this stage in my career than ever before. So as a reminder, like I said, be patient, be calm. It's okay to not know this for yourself. I didn't know this until I was looking for my VP job. But the things that I was looking for, so in terms of the role of the product, I wanted something that would help small businesses grow. I really love B2B products. I don't love the enterprisey ones where I've got to listen to the one customer that it has all the sway. I want to think about, hey, there's like thousands, millions of people out there doing jobs. I would like to make their jobs a little bit easier. The ideal thing, though, I wanted something that I wish I did, something that I enjoy, because I want to dog food the product. I want to try it out. I want to play with it. I want to empathize with the users. I want to have fun doing it, which is hard to find, right? But that's my ideal state, or was my ideal state. For market fragmentation, like I said, I look for a market that is highly fragmented. I don't want to chase whales. I don't want to ever have a meeting where it's like, hey, what are we going to do about that account? Because they're so big, we've got to, sacrifice ourselves, throw out the roadmap to do anything we can to win them or keep them. It's just not the type of job that excites me. I'd rather think about solving for the mass and helping millions of people to be successful. The acquisition model, I prefer a product-led model. I don't, because here's the reason why I love this the most, because when you have product-led growth and there's nobody telling the story, or if you're not paying for ads, or if you're not out there convincing people to buy it, then you can't have any doubt about the product market fit. It's that simple, right? Like it means that the product is speaking for itself. There's no smoke and mirrors that are convincing people to buy it. And for scale, I wanted to specifically work at the late growth stage. I used to tell my old manager at my previous company that I wanted to be at a company that was about 100 to 300 people in size. And the reason why is because at that stage, probably not going to collapse, right? If you're at a 10-person company, everybody knows like there's huge risks. It's existential crisis time for that scale of company. Only a few survive. But I don't want to be in that world. What I want to do is be at somewhere that's kind of stable and established. And there's a window of opportunity then, at still when it's not too big, where you get to define things for the first time. You get to define the strategy, you get to shape the culture, you get to define the craft and how you do product management at that company. And then lastly, as far as who I get to be, this is deeply important to me. So I want to go to work and feel like I'm a role model for my team and my children. And this is a quote. This is what I tell my son every day when I drop him off at preschool. Say, hey, Sammy, remember, listen to your teachers and help your friends. And the more I read about parenting stuff, the more I see and observe myself that they will do what you do. They're not going to do what you say. And so if that's what I want him to do, and if that's how I'd like him to grow up, how can I want that unless I'm doing it too? And so I want to be at a company where I can, really listen to the people and learn from them and help the people that are around me as well. So my job at PixieSet, I feel like I landed on a gold mine. I'm so happy there. It's been about 18 months now. But the role of product, we help photographers to grow. And so, I'm a hobby photographer. I like taking pictures. And I cherish the professional photos we have of our family. I included one in the deck here today. So that's fun for me. I love playing with our products, and I love helping that industry to grow. It's highly fragmented, so most of the industry is small or solo businesses. The acquisition model is 100% product-led. We don't have a sales team. So we just focus on delivering a great UX, great solutions for problems, and then the product grows by word of mouth primarily. And then for scale, I talked about it, but I wanted to be at a late growth type of company where I get to shape all of these really, really important things, this window of opportunity that never exists again. And then for who I get to be, at this company, I genuinely feel like I get to be a good person at work and home. I go to work and I get to be kind, I get to be curious, I get to be humble, honest, grateful, calm, and even fun. And I appreciate that. To me, that gives me more job satisfaction than the size of the company or being at the next level or any of those things that people often talk about. So do this for you. This is my call to action or the homework or what I'm hoping to arm you with. It's not a fancy template. There's no scoring or weighting or anything. If you want to add it, go for it. But you can tell, like for people, this is going to be deeply personal. The way that they evaluate and weigh these things is going to be different for each of you. But at least be conscious of it. That's kind of what I would ask you to do as you're looking at your PM career and your next PM job. Think about the role of the product, the market fragmentation, the acquisition model, the scale, and most importantly, I think, who you get to be at work. I put the ellipsis there, the 3 dots, because maybe there's other things, but if you're conscious about those and list them out for yourself, that's good too. And so if we looked at those quotes, the things I often hear at the beginning, here are some things that I would love to hear, over the next few years from a lot of you. Oops. I would love to hear people being thoughtful about, like what's going into the job. So I want to become the best at the data part of my craft. So if that's what you're looking for, I think a large scale company where that's the focus would be a great fit for my next move. That's a hugely insightful way to look at your job compared to I just want to go to the next level or be at a big tech company. I want to build lifelong relationships with my coworkers. I'm looking for a company where people stay for years and help each other grow. Think about that. I never hear people talking about this if I have a mentorship call. But why not? Isn't this one of the most important things ultimately to you at the end of the day? I love going deep with the customer and tailoring solutions for them. I'm looking for a company focused on a few key enterprise customers. And so great, go and find one, right? That'll help you to find the type of market and the type of product and the type of company that fits you. And lastly, I'll do the shameless plug thing. So if you liked what I talked about in terms of my job and PixieSet specifically, we're hiring. So we've got a PM role open right now. Sarah, are you in the room? Oh, there's Sarah. Okay, so Sarah's a director on my team and she's hiring and she's incredible. And now you know a little bit about how PixieSet works or what we're like as a company. And then we're also hiring a staff product designer role. And Rosara is one of our most senior designers and you'd be working alongside her. So find these people. There are other folks from PixieSet here today. And I think we fly under the radar some of the time, but I encourage you to try to learn a little bit more about us and talk to our team and learn from them as well. They're just great folks that can teach you a lot about their experience. And that's it. So thank you and good luck to all of you.